This is WBSM On Demand.
Good morning. It's a beautiful day here in the Northeast, here in Fairhaven, specifically Greater Fairhaven, the Greater New Bedford area. Beautiful morning out there. I don't know how the weather is in Austin, Texas, but we're going to find out. We're going to have a great guest of the program, a real intellectual, a journalist, serious energy journalist, Robert Bryce, will be joining us. Many of you got an opportunity to meet Robert when he came up to talk on Nantucket, and he was in Newport as well this past summer talking about the offshore wind. I hate to even call it energy, really. When you think about the pittance of energy it really produces in comparison to hydrocarbons, it's ridiculous. But many people are basing our future on windmill and solar, trying to stomp out hydrocarbons. But then we had an election, right? And Donald Trump prevailed overwhelmingly. He did pretty well in this area. Didn't win, but he won a lot of towns here. And I think some of that had to do with offshore wind. Well, now we're joined by Robert Bryce, an energy journalist par excellence. Good morning, Mr. Bryce. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, Chris. Now, call me Mr. Bryce, we're going to have trouble because my dad was Mr. Bryce, so we'll go from there, right?
Robert, you have a friend of yours. I read a beautiful article about him who's been nominated to be Energy Secretary. Tell us about Mr. Price. I'm sorry,
Chris Wright. Chris Wright is a friend of mine, and we've known each other for more than a decade. And I have mixed feelings about Donald Trump. He could have been better for the Secretary of Energy than Chris Wright. I hold Chris in high regard. He's an entrepreneur. He's an innovator. He's an intellectual. He's charismatic, and I think he's just exactly the right person to come into that spot after, frankly, 4 years of the Biden administration, when they have been and have really, I think the Department of Energy has been taken over by the anti-hydrocarbon crowd and the anti-industry. So I'm very hopeful for the Trump administration when it comes to energy. And you didn't ask me this, but I think one of the first things Trump's going to do is do everything he can to kill the offshore wind business. He's made that very clear.
Now, you've been studying energy for decades. How much power does Donald Trump or any president have over the offshore wind? Because how much is it a creature of federal subsidies?
Well, sure. So the subsidies are, through the Inflation Reduction Act for offshore wind are enormous. They can be up to 40% of the cost of the project can be made up of these tax credits. And one of the things that just sticks in my craw, just really irritates me about this whole thing, Chris, is that when you look at these project developers all along the eastern seaboard, who are they? They're foreign companies. They're not even American companies. And they're coming into the United States, taking tax credits from the taxpayers to build offshore wind projects in our waters and then harm some of our most critically endangered species, including the North Atlantic right whale. So I would be opposed even if it were American companies that were doing this. But the fact that it's foreign companies coming into the U.S. waters with the backing, of course, of the Sierra Club and these supposed climate activist groups and saying, the whales aren't going to be affected. The hell they're not. And so this is one of the things that, I'm full in this regard for the new Trump administration, that they will take an axe to the offshore wind energy scam, because that's what it is.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. He's an energy journalist. Robert, you have this fantastic article about Chris Wright, who's been nominated. He's the executive at Liberty Energy. He's got a Massachusetts connection. He did his undergraduate here at MIT. You call him an energy humanist. Explain that, sir.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I know in my career in journalism, and I've never had a real job. I've been a reporter my whole life. But that we are now in the period where our politics and a lot of our media has been dominated by a lot of anti-energy policy, a lot of anti-energy thinking, And if you're anti-energy, you're anti-human. And this is one of the things that Chris has really focused on is energy affordability and energy poverty. And so humanism is that you're pro-human, right? Well, I'm pro-human, but
Yes.
to be pro-human, you have to be pro-energy. And one of the things that Chris has done, he's created the Bettering Human Lives Foundation, but also as the head of and this founder and CEO of Liberty Energy. He's instead of adhering to this ESG baloney, right? He has in fact gone the other way and said, no, we are proud of being a hydrocarbon producer. Or in the hydrocarbon sector. They're hydraulic fracturing company primarily, and they published in their as a corporate document, the Bettering Human Lives report, in which they point out that hydrocarbons are essential to modern life and that they're a good thing, not a bad thing. And that alone is remarkable in a world where, corporate speak and greenwashing, where a lot of these oil and gas companies just, act ashamed to be doing what they're doing.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. He's an energy journalist. Robert, if my listeners want to read that article, where's the best place for them to get it?
Sure. On my Substack, robertbryce.substack.com. Did I say robertbryce.substack.com? I hope I mentioned robertbryce.substack.com.
.substack.com. Robert, you also have some really great free content out on YouTube, really fantastic energy series. Talk about that.
Well, sure. So, I'm on a lot of the social media channels. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok. Yeah, I'm an old man, but I'm on TikTok. I have a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter. PWR Hungry, Power Hungry is my handle on Twitter and on and on TikTok. But yes, I've done 2 energy focused documentaries. The latest one is a docu-series, a 5-part docu-series called Juice, Power, Politics, and Grid. And it's available on YouTube as well, or you can go to juicetheseries.com. 5 parts, each about 20 minutes long, and we focus on electricity and why it matters so much, and really proud of it. I worked on it with my colleague Tyson Culver, and we've had over 3 million views, and it's free.
It is a fantastic documentary. Like you said, it's in short 20-minute bits. Anybody can watch it. It's not, you don't have to be an energy expert to understand it. You make it very, very easy to understand. It's called juicetheseries.com. Robert, so what sort of a rocky road do our Massachusetts senators and the other Northeast senators have in store for Christopher Wright?
Well, let me step back and instead of just focusing on what, Chris Wright might be able to do at DOE,
Okay.
and one of the problems is that in the Northeast, you're in a very perilous situation. And I say this with no glee. I mean, but it's clear that if the Northeast and New England is hit by a prolonged winter storm, you don't have enough natural gas. And remember was it Constellation, or who is the company that just shut down the Mystic power plant there in Boston? So you're short electricity generation, you're short natural gas availability, and you're too dependent on fuel oil as in general in the Northeast and in New England. So this is the result of years of bad policy, and I will say it very clearly, because of Democratic politicians, including Andrew Cuomo in New York, who prevented the construction of more natural gas capacity pipelines through New York State. But Massachusetts and the rest of New England, you are cursed with some of the most expensive energy in the country, and your availability of energy is going to be stressed during extreme weather times. So, and no matter who's in the Department of Energy right now, they can't fix that in anything like the short term.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. He has a Substack, robertbrycesubstack.com. You should check it out. He's got a great piece about his friend, an energy humanist who's been nominated to be Donald Trump's Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. He's got a Massachusetts connection. He went to MIT. Robert, so they are continuing to double down up here on offshore wind and batteries for storage. They just passed more laws in the legislature to really make this even more expensive up here. What is the future for Massachusetts and Northeast energy consumers under the current Democrat rule?
Well, let me first say, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm disgusted, and I am totally disgusted. And, neither of these presidential candidates that we had voted on 2 weeks ago were appealing to me, and I think that was true for a lot of people. But I simply don't understand how it is that the Democratic Party in a heavily Democratic state like Massachusetts, where the Democrats have for years said, repeatedly said, oh, we're the party of the poor and the working class, when every move they make practically when it comes to energy screws the poor and the middle class, whether it's electric vehicle mandates, whether it's, gasoline taxes, whether it's prohibitions on the use of natural gas in homes. And Massachusetts is just a prime example of this. And, I see it in terms of, we have a remarkably resilient system of governance in the United States, and for good reason. It's great. We have this diffusion of power. But you look at democratically controlled states like Massachusetts, they've not, the Democrats have been in power forever, and they don't produce any energy, and they are trying to squeeze the availability of energy continuously. And what does that do? It's a regressive tax on the poor and the middle class. And I'm just enough of a liberal to think that's a bad thing.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. Robert, the nomination of Chris Wright, I think it's going to be fantastic. What is his opinion, do you know, of offshore wind?
Well, I don't know that in specific, okay. But my assumption is that he will agree with Trump in that it's a bad idea. And that, in my view, look, the only thing dumber than onshore wind energy, Chris, is offshore wind energy. I mean, I'm a longtime critic of the wind business. I don't like those people. I'm sure they don't like me back. I am just fine with that because I've seen how they treat people in rural America and try and run over them. And so I think, the Trump, through executive orders, through other moves, reining in the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, asking for more studies on the impact of these projects on marine mammals, including the North Atlantic right whale. There are a lot of things that he could do right away to create friction for these offshore wind guys, and I hope he does, and I hope he does it right away. But you didn't ask this. I think one of the other points that's really important to remember about Chris is that he's very much pro-nuclear. Yes. And, in fact, he's been on the board of Oklo, which is a small modular reactor company. And so he's put money into that sector. So, over the long term, and this won't happen quickly, but the U.S. has to adopt more nuclear power. We have to build our nuclear base because we're too dependent on natural gas. So that's one of the other areas where I think Chris will have a lasting impact, and I think the new administration is going to be on the same page.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. You can see more about his material at robertbrycesubstack.com. Robert, I noticed that Chris Wright is in favor of backing up our allies by increasing the exports of LNG and other natural gas and petroleum products overseas. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, one of the first things Trump is going to do, and I'm confident of this, is that he's going to end this silliness that was imposed by the Biden administration. And it was really, just an awful move, was this pause. They called it a pause on LNG exports. Well, they did it to appease the climate activist groups. But the reality is that the U.S. has to be exporting a lot of its gas because we're producing so much of it. So to produce more oil, it sounds counterintuitive. To produce more oil, we're going to have to export more natural gas, particularly out of places like the Permian Basin here in Texas and New Mexico. But we also have to remember that U.S. LNG is now it's critical, in fact, to Europe's energy security. The U.S. is now the biggest provider of LNG into Europe and has been for the last 3 years and will be this year again. So we live in a global economy. These molecules are going to find a home, but the U.S. now has to understand, particularly in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that our energy resources are incredibly important to our European allies, and we can't lose sight of that. And yet, because of these climate activists, these climate catastrophists who held sway in the Biden administration, they've held up that the projects that need to be developed to export that gas into the global market.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. He's got a great column about the current pick by Donald Trump to be the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, who's got a Massachusetts connection. He was at MIT. You can read more about Robert Bryce at robertbrycesubstack.com. I noticed that one of the people supporting Chris Wright is Howard Ham. I recently read his book on the energy industry and what has to happen. How significant is Harold Ham's support of Chris Wright?
Well, I think it's critical. I don't. What impresses Trump? People who are richer than him. So, I mean, let's be clear. And Harold Ham is a lot richer than Trump. What's he worth? I don't know, $20 billion, something like that. But Ham has been very successful, and all to him, right? He built his own company, and he deserves his success. But because Ham is close to Trump, and Ham endorsed Chris Wright, I think that, I don't know that was the single factor, but it was certainly very important.
I know that our own congressman, who's a Democrat, obviously, Bill Keating, he talks about the exportation of hydrocarbons to Europe to help, and he was doing that at the start of the war, and also he's in favor of small nuclear reactors. So there are not all Democrats are completely out to lunch.
Most of them.
Most of them, but most of them are.
When it comes to energy, most of them are. And again, and someone who's deeply disgusted with where we are in American politics. One other quick point about Harold Ham, and
Sure.
I just have to mention this. I have deep roots in Oklahoma, and proudly so. My mother was born and raised in Enid, Oklahoma, and that's where Harold Ham is from.
Yes.
So I just, it's a little addendum to what we've been thinking about. But, what's interesting to me about where we are with energy policy in America is that because we have private ownership of mineral rights and we have a robust oil and gas sector that is largely, we have a lot of really big companies, but we have a lot of really small companies. And it's one of the things that has really helped and as a key factor, rather, in America's prosperity is the private ownership of mineral rights, the ability of individuals like Ham to go out and drill and produce hydrocarbons and stuff that is, I'm not going to say exactly free, but it is one that is open to competition, and that ability and the shale revolution has given the U.S. an energy and price advantage over effectively every other country in the world. And one more point. So I haven't looked at the price today, but the price of natural gas at Henry Hub, which is the main trading hub here in the United States, is less than $3. Natural gas in Europe costs 4 to 5 times more. In Asia, it's 5 times more. So we have this incredible advantage over the rest of the world. And what I'm hoping, and why I think it's so important that Chris's his appointment here, is that what he can do, and I think the long-lasting effects will eventually, I hope, touch every consumer and make energy less expensive, more reliable, and more resilient. And that matters to everyone in America.
We're speaking with Robert Bryce. Robert, I was telling my audience before you in the last hour that if Donald Trump is going to come through in his administration with lowering inflation, lowering prices, they're going to have to do it by making energy more efficient. Talk about that for a second.
Sure. Well, and this is no easy task, Chris. I mean, let's be clear about what how diffused the ownership of the electricity market in the United States. For instance, here in Massachusetts, not a lot of cooperatives in Massachusetts, but there's something like 800 or 900 electric cooperatives in the United States. There are 2,000 municipally owned electric utilities, and then you have about 180 investor-owned utilities like Eversource, which has a big stake there in Massachusetts. So there's not one way where somebody like Chris Wright or Trump can go in and just wave a magic wand and say, well, we're going to lower electricity prices, because the system is so that the ownership, the geography, the fuels that are used in different areas are so diffused. It's not there's no one size fits all. So, it's going to be a gradual approach, and things will change gradually because the system is so enormous. As I said, 3,300 electricity providers in the U.S. in an enormous market. Electricity sales in the U.S. are roughly $500 billion a year. It's an enormous business, but it's also very fragmented. So, change will happen, but it will happen slowly.
We're talking with Robert Bryce. Robert, I really appreciate your time. Again, if people want to follow you, how do they do that on social media?
Sure. Well, I'm easy to find on the Google, but I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter @PowerHungry, PWR Hungry. on Substack, robertbryce.substack.com, and then check out our new docuseries at juicetheseries.com. Did I mention juicetheseries.com? I hope I mentioned juicetheseries.com.
juicetheseries.com. You're a great friend of the program, Robert. You do great journalistic work. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Very kind. Happy to do it anytime, my friend.
Thanks. That was Robert Bryce, everybody. Really great guy, knowledgeable guy. Really, we're lucky to have him here on the program. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stick around. Stickers on a Cadillac. So there's a lot of Cadillacs with deadhead stickers on them, right? Times have changed. 508-996-0500. What did you think of my last guest? Remember, folks, the energy radicals have taken over Massachusetts. They recently updated the laws. Here they're driving towards the Green New Deal here in Massachusetts. Now, obviously, some energy efficiency is good. But the idea that we're going to live with really high electric costs because we're going to buy them from foreigners setting up windmills out in the ocean, I think it's crazy. I would rather get my power from inexpensive hydrocarbons that are available around the clock. They put a new battery mandate here in Massachusetts. You can check it out at Commonwealth Beacon Magazine. Do you know who owns the battery technology, or at least the batteries that they're putting in? Former Congressman Joe Kennedy III. The guy who many of us supported for U.S. Senate. He's been over in Ireland as an appointee of Biden. He came back to cut the ribbon on a multi-million-dollar battery installation in the town of Wellesley that the town of Wellesley purchased from him and Citizen Energy. It's a tremendous article available in Commonwealth Beacon Magazine, which is a fine publication, a free publication. You can, the fact that it's free doesn't mean it's not good, right? You can read it online at Commonwealth Beacon Magazine. It's a great Massachusetts-focused magazine, public policy magazine. They often have articles about our own mayor, John Mitchell, who will be here at 11 o'clock. 508-996-0500. Again, folks, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to rally around Christopher Wright, who's been nominated by President Trump to be the head of the Energy Department, right? He's got his undergrad from MIT. He got a master's degree in electrical engineering, did graduate work anyway, out in California. So I think this guy could be a key to the solution, right? It's going to take a lot of people rowing in the right direction. But the current energy prices and the trajectory that we're on, it's going to make us all paupers. All paupers. Good morning. Thanks for holding.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm not bad. How are you, my friend?
Good. I enjoyed your last guest.
Thank you.
And he has made a lot of valid points. Is to run this country, it takes a combination of different types of energy, and solar panels and windmills aren't going to make it. And I wanted to ask you. Did you hear about this Quest Center renovation?
Yes. In fact, the mayor is going to be in the next hour. We'll talk about it with him. The Quest Center renovation. It's going to be, looks like an office for offshore wind.
Yeah, Vineyard Wind.
Vineyard
Wind. Going to
Wind.
move in there. And the thing is that the renovation is $3 million, and all of a sudden they found $1.5 million in opera funds to donate to this project, when they were saying that they were all dedicated, all the funds were dedicated, there was no monies available, the councils couldn't get the police signs, different things. To me, this is crazy. The companies that own Vineyard Wind, they got portfolios of billions of dollars. Why would we take opera funds and put them to a project like this, when not taking that money and putting it to the water and sewer treatment plant? You know what I mean?
I do. I am always suspicious of corporate subsidies, corporate welfare, right? Government handouts to corporations. So the mayor will be here in the next hour. He's on the list of things we're going to talk about with the mayor. I'm sure he's going to explain it. I know that he's a big fan of this, and so I'm willing to listen to the man. But seems like it's going in the wrong direction, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I mean, to me, I don't know what the other viewers listeners think, but all of a sudden, you know, all the funds were gone. And all of a sudden, here they are. I mean, what's going on? You know, is it like an eggshell game up there that they're hiding these funds? Something's not right up there. And, you know, to me, when I looked and you go down the trail of looking at Vineyard Wind and you look at the parent companies that own them, when they have billions of dollars, they could buy land and build a whole new facility if they wanted. What is it? What's enticing the mayor to go in and give them, you know, money that could be used to help out the taxpayers, small businesses, and homeowners to get some relief? $1.5 million is not chump change.
No.
And to me, this is like all of a sudden coming out of the woodwork. This is crazy. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'll be willing to hear him out. I've asked him point blank a few times how he, 10 years in office and no tax relief or anything for the homeowners and small business. And he comes up with a song and dance, blaming the council, blaming this. I specifically want to know from him, what are you going to do next year or this year? How are you going to help us finally? I mean, it just isn't panning out, and it's kind of disheartening. That's all. And I appreciate you having him on, but sometimes it's like we really don't get a lot of oomph out of what he's saying.
He'll be here. Thanks for the call, my friend. He'll be here in the next hour, so he'll be happy to take your phone calls. He always enjoys. In fact, I would call it sparring a little bit with the callers, or in hearing your concerns and your complaints. So the mayor of New Bedford will be here in the next hour. In the meantime, you can get on the air now at 508-996-0500. That's how you can do it. New England Patriots are going to try again, right? New England Patriots broadcast all season long here on WBSM. They're going to be, they had a rough start again against the LA Rams, but they're going to come back. They got nothing else to do. They're going to come back against longtime rivals Miami Dolphins. They're going to be down in South Florida taking on the Dolphins this Sunday. Pre-game is at 10 a.m. Kickoff is at 1 p.m. Dolphins against the Patriots. New England Patriots all season long right here on WBSM. We got some people on hold. Good morning. Thank you for holding.
Good morning, Chris.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad, Dayton.
I'm going to talk about a little bit about Mia Brzezinski that's doing a lot of chirping about Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Is she aware that her father, Zbigniew Brzezinski, a communist? Does she know that? And he helped start the Rockefeller, with the Rockefellers, they started the Trilateral Commission back in 1973.
I'm sure she knows all that. I know all that. Zib.
Yeah, I know you did.
But the Trilaterals, yeah, that was then he came in with Jimmy Carter.
Well, here's the story. Here's how it happened. I'm going to give you a rundown of what happened.
Okay.
And I love talking to you because you're not like other talk hosts on other stations that argue with me when I say this and say I'm making it up. You know the facts, brother. You've never not known what I told you,
Right.
And I appreciate that. Jimmy Carter, they wanted one of their own to be in the Trilateral Commission. So what they did was Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Rockefellers used to have Carter dine with them at the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York as early as 1971. They liked Carter because he was bringing big money in from Brussels to Georgia. And it came down between Carter and a governor in Florida. Ever heard of Reuben Askew? Of course you did.
Yes.
They were going to pick Askew, but they liked Carter because he was bringing all the money in. In fact, they even thought about going, if anything ever happened in New York, they'd go down to Georgia, and they were going to call that Rockefeller South. Have you heard that terminology?
One of the Rockefellers became the governor of Arkansas, and I know that they have property in Georgia, a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, and Carter was not a bad man. He was a moral man. He was a man of faith, but he got mixed up with them. And he wasn't like the other, nothing like Biden. He had a lot of sleepless nights. I know I done wrong. He knew it. He was a man of convictions.
Still alive.
That's if anybody ever asks you a trivia question, you know the answer. When President's Day comes, who's the first Trilateral Commission president? Every time I ask somebody, they don't know.
Oh, I remember it because that was big talk, and even in the 80s. And of course, I've read a lot of the same books you've read.
Yeah, back in 73, brother.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Dighton. I always appreciate it. We'll take a break. Remember, the mayor of New Bedford will be here at 11 o'clock. He's got a lot of announcements, and he'll take your questions as well. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back. Right to Robbie Dupree. Why don't we steal away? 508-996-0500. Good morning. Thanks for holding.
Come on, Chris. How you doing this
Not
morning?
bad. How are you, my friend?
Good. I have a question for you that maybe you can help me out with. And this is regard to Congressman Gates. Did he run for re-election? And if he did he win? And if he did win, if he's not appointed to the big job, would he come back and serve as congressman?
Hey, is this Tom Kennedy?
Yeah.
Hey, I've been wondering where you were. I got a lot of people asking me questions where you've been. People miss you out there. I miss you, Tom. I'm glad you called back. Listen, so on Gates, yes, he was reelected to the next Congress. If he doesn't get the Attorney General's job, no, I believe he's not planning on being seated in the next Congress. So I think he'd be out totally, I believe.
I don't think, I think that the resignation affected this term. Okay. But the activity of being seated for the next term hasn't happened yet. He would have to resign again, I think.
So
I think that's
and that could be right, Tom, but my full understanding is the reason he resigned so quickly is so that the governor can set a special election and they can get someone seated right away.
Oh,
so
I see.
I believe that he's done in Congress. Anyway.
Yeah. Well,
what do you think's going to happen, Tom?
Anything can happen.
Right.
I have to. I lean to the liberal side, but not completely. But for example, I didn't vote for Elizabeth Warren. I voted for the other guy. But I have to accept that Donald Trump's the president.
Yes,
and that's okay with me. I'm going to sit back and watch the show. I'll try to contribute. One thing that I'd like to contribute, maybe if you have a half a minute this morning.
Yeah, go ahead.
I currently live at 790 Brock Avenue. I was fortunate to get in here. It's a subsidized place. The room, this is the big one. The room has the Section 8, not me. If I walk out of here, I'm on my own. But because of that, the way this is set up, I think every housing project nationwide should be doing this. Because what happens is I'm required to make sure that this room is clean. They have inspections. Doesn't relieve, they don't take away my rights as a tenant. But there's a discipline involved here. And it operates tremendously versus some of the other housing projects that you see throughout the country. I don't know if Kennedy's in charge of that part, but where you are in the Republican stream, maybe you could send that up. Because remember last time I tried to send something up and got taken away by Cruz. Remember that one?
Yes.
But this idea, I think, is something, and you could actually use this building as a model for the nation, the way this place is run.
Well,
And
I'm glad to hear that, Tom. As a veteran, I'm glad that they were finally able to give you what you've really earned.
Well, this wasn't through the veterans. Veteran criteria didn't have anything there, and I didn't ask any politician to help me. I had to wait in line just like everybody else. But it came for me in the nick of time anyway. But be that as it may, the process here is absolutely phenomenal. You know, the place is kept spick and span clean. They have tremendous, how should I say, janitorial engineers.
Sure.
The management is very strict. And that's what it should be like.
Absolutely.
Instead of having people coming in from California with Section 8 certificates, going down on trip towers demanding a place, and they go to the top of the list, and they can leave whenever they want. And they can use the law if they're going to get kicked out for drug dealing and stuff like that. All that stuff, you know, is negative to housing. This is the model that the whole nation should use right here, in my opinion. And I've been around for a while. So
you have, Tom. Listen, I'm glad to hear your voice again, because I'm telling you, I can't. It was mostly off the air. People would say to me, "Have you heard from Tom Kennedy?" I said, "No, I haven't. He's beginning to worry me." So I'm glad we heard from you.
We've had some issues that way, but that's okay. The Veterans Administration services are taking care of me real well, and I get good medical coverage. That's the other thing. The whole nation should adopt what they're doing. I have never had to wait for a doctor for more than 10 minutes. Think of that.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, I mean, they changed it. It wasn't like this, you know, half a dozen years ago. Now it is unbelievable. And it says right on the door where you wait, a waiting room. If you're waiting more than 10 minutes, come to the window. And they straighten it out. I've never had to wait more than 10 minutes, except for one on the surgical end, which was a whole different phenomenon. But yeah, it's tremendous. That's another model we should adopt. But we'll see how it goes up. But for you, you know, you guys controlled the narrative. You did well. And maybe what you're saying about Hodgson will come through, because I certainly won't vote for the current governor. And I'm a liberal.
Yes.
It's gone too far. And, you know, that's a shame. And hopefully, if it ain't Hodgson, you know, somebody at least that's conservative to get the state straightened out, because this can affect everything.
Tom,
Everything
I mean, look, I measured Healy against her Republican opponent, and I thought she had more experience and a better resume, and I voted for her. I mean, I would never vote for her again. I can't imagine how bad of a candidate the Republicans would have to put up for me to vote for Maura Healey again. She's an absolute disaster.
It's terrible for the state, absolutely terrible. And they're being stuck in the mud positions now. You know, is it going to do us any good? You know, the cutback in funds. Think of all the Central American kids where the state puts up $6,000 per kid, and these kids start leaving. What happens to our school department budget if there's 2,000 of them? You know what I mean?
It's crazy. It's great. Tom, I'm glad to hear from you, my friend. Thank you. Folks, another great New Bedford business, Mac Auto Sales, 188 Rivet Street, New Bedford. They repair all makes and models. If you're going to get your car ready for the obviously coming winter, reach out and call Mac Auto Sales, 508-565-6221. They're open weekdays 9 to 5. They specialize in servicing foreign automobiles. I know we bring Natalie's BMW there. Ask about their aftermarket accessories, and you can beat inflation by buying a new-to-you automobile, a quality used car at Mac Auto Sales. Tell them Chris McCarthy sent you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. I'm Chris McCarthy. That's my brother Neil, actually, playing on an alternative country tribute to the Rolling Stones called Paint It Black. It's an album. You can find it on YouTube. I guess you can find it. I know you can find it in the stores, too. Do we have stores anymore? I don't know. I know we have some great stores in downtown, but we have a record store on the bridge. I do know that. I used to like it when it was a magazine store, too. I got a lot of publications. That store, apparently, they only have one now in Swansea, but it's a good store. Magazine Town or something like that. Anyway, so the mayor of New Bedford will be here in the next hour. He'll be taking your calls at 508-996-05. There's a lot to talk about with the mayor, a lot of ground to cover. I imagine you're going to want to get on early at 508-996-0500. The phone lines usually fill up, but there was some discussion in the city council this week about the new position the mayor wants to add. And look, I kind of agree with the mayor that in terms of other cities, he runs a pretty lean ship. But I know that I don't pay taxes in the city of New Bedford, so I imagine a lot of you will be willing to disagree with me on that. But you can do that at 508-996-0500. We come around in the next hour. We're going to have the local news, the national news, and then we'll come back. And we're going to have the mayor's playlist.